Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it's November 19th, 2010. This is going to be on security, specifically, I guess, hospital security. I don't get many requests from people asking me to talk about some subject or asking me questions, but I have had a few people over the last few months and recently, a few more, asking me about working hospital security. So if you're not interested in this subject, go watch one of my other videos. I'm not going to put this in my main category. I'm not going to put it in my video blog playlist or whatever, but I've got a hospital security playlist and I'll put it in there, and hopefully the people will find it. So I don't have any notes. I just am not good at making notes. I make lists. I make a lot of lists. I'm not good at making notes. So it's just going to be off the top of my head and probably not in the proper order or not. But order or not. I worked hospital security from 1972 to November of 1999, so you might say till 2000. And then I worked the U.S. Census during 2000, and then I never thought I'd work hospital security again, but I ended up down in Orlando, Florida, and was kind of bored, and so I thought I'd get a contract guard job. And just sitting at a desk inside of an office building checking people in or something like that. And I went to the U.S. Security was the name of them. I went there and filled out an application, and they went, "Oh wow, man, we have a hospital account. We want you to be in charge of it." I said, "No, not it, So I ended up in charge of, for a contract guard agency, their hospital account. That was terrible. That was unbelievable. Let me come back to that. And then I thought I'd retired really in 2000, but I ended up, later on I also worked for about a year at security at a mall. And I actually worked security at a couple FAA control towers too after that, 2000. But back to hospital security. Should you get a job in hospital security? Is a good place to work? Well, the healthcare industry is, a massive. I don't know if you look around for, who is employing people. They're employing a lot of people. If you're going to work hospital security, now if you need a job, you need a job. And my philosophy in my entire life is, and I've worked my entire life. I never had any periods of unemployment. You gotta work, and you may have to take a job that you don't want to take. If you gotta support your family, you gotta support your family. So far as working hospital security, get a job in-house security where the hospital employs you. Do not get a job working for a contract guard agency. And I don't think Burns and Pinkerton and Wells Fargo, I think those companies, Burns and Pinkerton, I think they combined, and I think some of those other companies don't exist anymore, and even some of those that do exist were purchased by one of them. I know a big company in the UK, I think, owns some of these agencies. But they're contract guard agencies, and I always think of Burns, Pinkerton, and Wells Fargo. And I actually worked part-time for those three companies and others. Do not work for a contract guard agency unless you absolutely positively have to. Don't work, when you work hospital security or any kind of security, try to work in-house security where you're actually a company employee. You're not a contract employee. So, and I think you're going to I don't know about other areas of the United States. I know about I did know about the greater Kansas City area, and I think there was something like 22 hospitals there, if I remember correctly, because I think the hospital that I eventually worked for was one hospital, and I worked for them 18 years, and by the time I was done, they owned like 17 hospitals. They bought up the other hospitals. And in the Kansas City area, it started out all the hospitals were, before I went to work for them, before I went to work hospital security, Pinkerton, the contract guard agency, had all the contracts. And then I think all of the hospitals, maybe there was one someplace, went to in-house security and didn't use any contract employees at all, any contract security companies at all. You want to make sure if you're working, I think of all the hospitals, and I worked for, in Kansas City area, I worked for, in this order, St. Joseph Hospital, Trinity Lutheran Hospital, Research Medical Center, Menorah Medical Center, 1 year part-time, and I was still working for Research Belton Hospital, Menorah, I said Menorah, Lee Summit Hospital. Well, that's all I can think of. But anyway, all of the hospitals that I worked for, security officers were armed. Almost all of the hospitals in Kansas City, I think except for a couple hospitals, except for two, the hospital security officers were armed. I really don't recommend going to work for any hospital, working hospital security, if you're not armed. At the first hospital I worked at, St. Joe Hospital, we had a security force of 10 security officers. Out of 10 security officers, we had 2 that were shot. Dan Stagel was permanently disabled. About a year later, John Galegas was killed. At Trinity Lutheran Hospital, a couple of weeks before I went to work, one of the security officers was walking to work. He lived close by. He was shot in the arm. During the time that I worked, 5.5 years at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, we had a doctor that was shot and killed in the parking lot by a female doctor, by her ex-boyfriend. We had a guy working at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, and who I was saying, what's wrong with this guy, to the other security officers. What's with the deal with this guy? What's something wrong with this guy? Turned out he was a serial armed robber / killer. He even left work at the hospital, and on his lunch hour went and killed a couple of people, robbed a adult bookstore that was a couple blocks away, and he killed both the people who worked there. When he did an armed robbery, he killed whoever was there. And there was other situations. Research Medical Center, about a year or so before I went to work there, they had a big shootout in the lobby of the hospital. A guy came in with a rifle, and his grudge was against Veterans Hospital, but he didn't have transportation to get to the Veterans Hospital, and Research Hospital was just down the street from it. He went into the lobby. He took the security officer hostage that was in the lobby. The other security officers responded. The guy who was taken hostage managed to roll away, and a shootout ensued in the lobby. And during the time that I worked for them, I left work one day. I was working second shift. Second shift. Got off about 11 o'clock. Pulled out of the hospital. Drove about a block or half a block, and somebody shot at me. Hit my car. We had a security officer on evenings or midnight shift, I think it was midnight shift. He was patrolling out in the car. Somebody shot into the car, patrol car. Can't remember. You get the idea. You need to be armed. And there again, if you need a job, you need a, but now if you're going to, if some hospital hires you and says you'll be, in a locked room watching monitors, well, that's fine. Maybe you don't have to be, maybe you don't have to be armed. If you're walking around trying to protect the facility and the employees and the staff and the patients and everybody, you need to be armed. And so if a hospital doesn't want to arm their security officers, try not to go to work for them. Are hospitals good places to work if you're a security officer? It's just about impossible to tell. I could go through it's just going to depend on the management of the hospital. Do they have security just so they can put in their brochures that they hand out to the newly admitted patients? Oh, we have security here to protect you, Or, are they really behind the program? It depends too who your director of security is. And of course, you're not going to know that probably. I mean, if you go for an interview, maybe you can tell, but probably you can't. So if you're interested in working at a specific hospital or something, maybe you could talk to some guys who work there. Hey, how do you like this place? Do they pay pretty well? And that type of, and do a little background research. Working. One of the guys who asked me a question about should he work at hospital security and is a good place to work. He's going to school and he's getting a degree. I don't know whether it's a 2-year or 4-year degree in law enforcement. If you get that degree, maybe you should get a job. I know it's not popular right now, but maybe airport security and maybe you get something in supervisory. Maybe. If you're thinking of getting into law enforcement, it's not really going to be to your advantage to get a job as a hospital security officer and then, I mean, it'll be, I know, I work with a lot of guys who worked hospital security and then, waited till they could get hired by a police department. And I worked at hospitals where we had police officers who quit the police department and came to work for us, even a chief of police who came to work for us because we paid better. But if you want to get into law enforcement, if that's your goal, maybe try to get into law enforcement. And if you're a minority, it's probably going to be easier because a lot of departments are looking to hire women, and minorities. And if you're a white male, it's probably going to be harder, but still. It used to be in Kansas City, Missouri, that because of state law that you had to have X amount of training in order to be a police officer. Police departments would hire you and then pay for you to go to the police academy. The only way you could go to the police academy was for a police department to, issue a letter or whatever said this person has, is working for us or going to work for us. And I liked that. But they changed it, and now in Kansas City, Missouri, you can just go to the police academy like you're going to go to a community college or whatever. You can just go to the police academy and you may weigh 500 pounds and not be too swift or be wanting to shoot somebody or beat the crap out of it. I mean, you can just go to the police academy and then you graduate from the police academy And then you can go to a police department and say, hey, you don't have to pay for me to go to the police academy. And I know guys who should not have been police officers who got hired by police departments, and that's the way it worked out. They paid to go to the police academy, and they went to some small police department and said, hey, you don't have to pay my salary and pay, for the police academy. I've already certified. And so some of those people were hired. So, look around for situations like that. If you're a young person and you want to work for a police department, I'm sure most of the police departments will have maybe a citizen type thing where you go for 2 or 3 nights and they tell you all about the police department, and it's free, and it's, they're trying to do PR or whatever. Go do that. That's that's not going to be, but you'll find out a little bit. You'll be at the police department looking around. You look at the bulletin board. They got stuff like that. If they have a reserve force where they don't, some of them pay you, some don't. See if you can sign up for the, if you're young and you're underage or whatever, they may have a police cadet program or a Boy Scout program that's affiliated or something. Join that. If they have a reserve force, join the reserve force if they'll take you. Sometimes it's about as hard to get in the reserve as it is to get in, hired by the police department. But get in the reserve. Two, and go back to hospital security or whatever. The first hospital I worked at for 3.5 years, and then I think I put the story on a YouTube video, so I won't go into it. But I knew I needed to move on. I had made some waves, and so I went over and applied at another hospital. I went in and went to the personnel department, and the personnel lady kind of abrupt, and turned out though that personnel department was an excellent personnel department. The director of security there was a fantastic director of security. The department was really run the way you would hope that a personnel department. But anyway, this lady said, you have to have 2 years experience as a security officer. I said, I've got it. Oh, well, you have to have a year as institutional security. I said, I've got it. She said, oh, okay. So I filled out the form, and she called, and the director of security said, I'll come down. And he came down and then walked me down the hallway, and we got on the elevator. He's taking me up to his office to interview me. We get on the elevator, and Dr. Nigro, who was on the staff at Trinity Lutheran Hospital and at St. Joe Hospital. And Dr. Nigro says, Jim, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm trying to talk this man into giving me a job. And Dr. Nigro says, you better give him a job. He's an excellent security officer. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was it. I had the job. So, because the director of security, when he interviewed me, he said something which I didn't agree with, but I didn't tell him I didn't agree with it. During the time he was interviewing, he says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I went home and told the wife, I hope I get the job there, but this director of security, he said, it's not, it's who you know. I don't like that. By the way, anyway, I got a call right away, and it was that director of security. He says, okay, you got the job. So I said, okay, great. And he told me when to start. I hung up, telephone rang, and I picked it up, and it was North Kansas City Hospital, director of personnel. And he said, because I'd sent an application in there. He said, we'd like for you to work for us, and whatever. And I said, I just took a job at Trinity. And he said, well, I used to be director of personnel there. I think you'd be much happier at North Kansas City Hospital. I said, well, I'm sorry, I already, took the job there. Well, this is 1930, 19 minutes. That's too long. So I'll have to cover some of this. If you have any questions, specific questions, and I'll have to do another one of these. I just got started, so. But I need to end this. 20 minutes is too long, so.